To make Shadow the Hedgehog, I first start by making an armature out of some paper clips and aluminum foil. I make bends wherever limbs would be. I first make a bend on the hip, then one at the center of the chest up from the hip, and then one at the arm. I copy that over and connect them together with some aluminum foil. The aluminum foil gets connected over their chest and then cut to be the proper size and just flattened on there because Shadow is kind of a skinny guy. After that, I cover the chest and body of the armature with some of the black clay that the body is going to be made up of so that I can bake the armature and make it more rigid so that I can bend the specific joints into specific positions. For this, I bend the hips, then the knees, and then the arms to the correct pose. Once the armature is then finally finished, I can then make the legs out of just some more black clay. Once I cover both the legs in black clay, I need to keep thickening up the legs and making them smooth and interconnected with the body. Then I flatten out some areas that I can't reach with a tool that I have. Then I bulk out the body in order to make it look more like how the body is supposed to look. Then once all of the body and both the legs are smoothed in, I add the little red spiky texture that is on the bottom of the legs. After that, I add the back texture with the two spines on the shoulder blades and the one tail. These get blended into the body so that there's no obvious seam. And then I start working on the little poof on the chest. This starts out as a somewhat close heart design, except then I push out the tops of the heart to be out on the side, and then I cut in little tufts of hair. I then make a small incision in the middle and place it onto the body. Once this is done, I then start to make the arms. The arms are once again just worms of black clay wrapped around the bits of armature that are sticking out, flattened so that there's no obvious seam, and then bent to the proper shape. Once these are bent to the proper shape and blended into the rest of the body, I bend them to the proper shape. I then add little balls for the shoulders, the elbows, and the other shoulder and elbow. After that, I add little red worms on the arms for that little design. These go on to both arms and are basically the same as how they are on the legs. After that, I start making these shoes with a giant ball of white clay. I add a big white ball to both of the feet in order to make the base of the shoes. I then get a flat sheet of black clay and put it on the back half of the shoe in order to make the design. I then cut the edges of the black little sheet flat so that they're flat and not triangular like they were before. This then gets repeated over on the other shoe, and after it's done on both the shoes, I put a little red dot at the base to make the tongue of the shoe. Then I raise the foot up a little bit and put a big red sheet onto the bottom half of the shoe in order to make it look consistent. I then add a worm of yellow clay around the ankle and the top part of the shoe in order to, make the ring at the top of the shoe like in the design. I do this to both feet once again, like most other things, because Shadow the Hedgehog is decently symmetrical. And then, after that, and they're both added, blended in, and made to look like rings, I add the little boosters that are, the only ones visible in this case, on the raised part of the shoe. I hollow them out with a very small ball stylus that I just recently got. After that, I add the little red worm that goes around the foot in order to make that raised and not just a flat sheet. These worms go in 2 segments on the feet, one in the front and one in the back. These go along the edge of the flat red sheet. This also gets repeated on both feet. Now, once that's done, I start to work on the gloves. The gloves start out as hands that just get a thumb pinched out, and then the fingers cut with a tool. The fingers then get curled into a fist, with the thumb going on top of the fingers. This then gets placed into the arm that is lowered down. Of course, after the arm has been baked in order to set it to be solid. I then add a black wristband, a red little dot, and a yellow ring around the base, the gap between the wrist thing and the glove. I then do this once again, except in a better way that ended up turning better by having a hole already in the hand. A black thing around the wrist, a red dot on the back side of the hand, and then a ring. Except I didn't like how the old hand turned out, so I just decided to make a new one. Then I started to work on the head by making the eyes. The eyes, of course, are not flat, and they are interconnected, so I have to do that. By doing this, I added a little piece of black clay onto the back in order to allow them to curve. I then added a big black ball on the little piece that I had, and pushed the eyes into it. Then I added a worm to have a good seam that made it seamless between the eyes and the head. This little worm gets blended into the rest of the black, not the eyes of course, since the eyes have to be separate, and I use a bunch of separate tools to make sure that the seam is seamless. Once this is basically invisible, I make the skin tone that Shadow has, which is a very orangish tan. This gets placed onto the mouth area, and then I add in a little mouth, again with a very small ball stylus. I then add a small black dot for the nose, and I add in the little red worms at the top of the eyes. After this, I bulked up the head by adding a flat sheet, and then I added the ears. The ears are just small cones that get indented, some skin colored placed into it, and then that indented as well. This then gets placed on top of the head and blended into the rest of the head. Of course, only the black, not the tan. This gets duplicated over one more time to give it 2 ears, and then I added red pupils the same way that I am adding the black pupils right here. Then I added little light shines of light with the white clay, and then I added the little spinies on the back of Shadow's head. These are definitely something. These get blended in to the rest of the head, and then have a little bit of red on top of them as a design or something. This gets repeated 5 more times on various places across the head. I started with the middle ones, so the top middle, then the middle back, and then each of them, of course, once they are blended in, get a little red line on top of it. Then I started on the sides, but the upper side, starting with the upper left side and then the upper right side. These both getting blended into the rest of the head, except these ones have a slight upwards, not curve, but a slight upwards jut as they get to the back part. These still, when they are blended in, get the red worms on top of them. And then these red worms get pushed down so that it is not very obvious that they were tubes in the beginning. Of course, both of these little spikes get the coils, and then I start working on the bottom spikes. These, of course, are the last spikes, and these, while the others jutted outwards, actually curve outwards. These, like all of the other spikes, actually get fully blended into the head. And same with all the other spikes, get the red treatment on the top part of the spike, so that everyone gets the red. Once this part is done, there's only one more thing that I need to do. That's make a base out of some flattened green clay, and then stick shadow on there. Of course, I did break a few parts, so I fixed it up with glue, and with that, it's done.